No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 115. Click and subscribe to our brand new news source. Breaking right now. Furious farmers descend on Westminster to protest the despicable tax raid on their family businesses by the socialist Labour government. And the MSM is typically revolting, with the British bashing corporation ignoring them altogether and Sly News literally laughing in their faces.
It really is a serious issue, Kay, that we're about to see being played out on Whitehall.
I'm just looking at some pictures that our producer, Sam, has just sent in. He's just nipped down to see what he can see, and it's the image of tractors literally on London streets, with a juxtaposition of vans and vehicles and buses. It's wild.
Ironically, on London streets, the tractors will not be the slowest traffic either. They'll be able to keep up with the prevailing conditions, won't they? But there's a New Holland on the left-hand side, a John Deere on the right. We've seen some fence, some cases, I think possibly even a McCormick, which you don't often see. So I'm having a very lovely day.
Oh, yeah, it's just such a laugh, isn't it? Just such a laugh. Who gives a damn about the farmers' livelihoods? No wonder, with a response like that, Nigel Farage is now the Bookies' favourite to become Prime Minister as a political tidal wave sweeps Westminster, and the party's chairman rules out any electoral pacts with the Conservative Party. I'll have much more on that in my digest next. And then today's superstar panel weighs in. Absolutely delighted to have fresh from that protest, Alan Miller of the Together Declaration. And Father Phil Harris is with us too for the entire show. Also coming up today, a Jeremy Corbyn pro-Hamas party is coming to Westminster, and one of their MPs doesn't want first cousin marriages outlawed. And is free speech now dead in British newspapers and magazines, as the Spectator is censured for referring to a man as a man? Then, in the Uncancelled Aftershow, royal YouTube sensation Paula M joins Outspoken for the first time to reveal Meghan Markle's big new lie in the worst ever Netflix series, Polo. The Uncancelled Aftershow now broadcast exclusively daily and on demand on my Substack. You can Google it or get to it right now directly by visiting www.outspoken.live. Just enter your email address in that little gap there and you can sign up completely for free. If you do want to support the show, though, which I really appreciate, you can subscribe to a monthly paid membership, which gives you access to the after show, my exclusive reporting and columns, access to our live chats on the Substack app, and the chance to join a thriving community. Substack is a safe space free of censorship, and your support from just £5 a month not only gives you 30 minutes of extra content every single weekday, it allows me to continue making this independent daily news show. But now, let's go. Emily Maitlis, James O'Brien, Beth Rigby, please block your ears. Block your ears right now. I've got news you're not going to like. Nigel Farage will be the next British Prime Minister. That's actually me predicting it back in June, the moment Nigel announced he was running to become an MP in Clacton. And finally, everyone else is catching up, with the Bookies Ladbrokes, they're one of the biggies, making reform 9-4 to win the most seats overnight. And Farage is now the odds-on favourite to succeed Starmer as the next British Prime Minister. There's the full list, though. Kemi Badenoch 3-1, Angela Rayner 6-1, Wes Streeting 10-1, Boris Johnson 14-1, Yvette Cooper 16-1. As Darren Grimes rightly pointed out, no wonder the attacks on reform are 10 times more desperate, and they really are. Let's take Beth. You know Beth from Sly News? Sly News, a broadcaster that has become deranged in quite an obsessive manner, actually, about a spent conviction by the Reform UK MP James McMurdoch about a contested act of teenage violence against his then-girlfriend that took place 20 years ago. Now, a despicable act, of course. No one is disputing that. Certainly not James McMurdoch, but one he has fully repented for and turned his life around. But Sly, they cover this story far more than For example, the current Prime Minister lying to the public about hiring a convicted fraudster to his first cabinet without telling the public. Or how about the current Prime Minister having a Chancellor who completely faked her CV? What I like, though, is that Nigel is starting to realise the MSM are not to be cooperated with. Watch his takedown of Sly when Beth pushed him too far.
Very well.
But for the victim,
for
him to imply that she was pushed over when the court document says he kicked her, that's difficult for the victim, isn't it?
I'll believe anything you say.
It's not what I say, it's what the court document says.
I haven't read
it's not what I said, it's a court
document. I don't know, it's
document.
20 years ago. And this is why, and this is why, you know, mainstream media like you are losing the affections of the British public. Let's worry about where we are today. Let's worry about where the country's going. Let's worry about the fact we're getting poorer. Let's worry about the fact that our communities are breaking down, that people are scared to walk on the streets of London wearing a watch or jewellery.
That wasn't my question.
No,
I know.
What
I'm asking you...
You're talking about an inside Westminster story that you want to talk about.
If you want to professionalise the party... then these are questions people are going to ask. And if it was another political party and this has happened, you would expect me to ask them as well.
I have not heard you ask a single Labour minister about the case where a man was on the ground in Runcorn.
The sooner Nigel realises that the MSM is finished and it's the independent media that will accurately report on Reform's message, the better. And trust me, we're in a battle for the soul of Britain and the future of Western civilization. The MSM just don't understand that. Take the news today that the so-called Gaza Five, who use the Independent Alliance banner at the moment, or as I call them, the pro-Hamas mob currently led by Jeremy Corbyn, well, they are intending to form a formal political party in the new year. Now, one of the members is Iqbal Muhammad, the MP for Dewsbury and Batley, who yesterday argued against outlawing first cousin marriage.
The way to redress this is not to empower the state to ban adults from marrying each other, not least because I don't think it would be effective or enforceable. Instead, the matter needs to be approached as a health awareness issue and a cultural issue where women are being forced against their will to undergo marriage. In doing so, it is important to recognise for many people this is a highly sensitive issue, and in discussing it, we should try to step into the shoes of those who perhaps are not from the same culture as ours, to better understand why the practice continues to be so widespread. An estimated 35 to 50% of all sub-Saharan African populations either prefer or accept cousin marriages, and it is extremely common in the Middle East and in South Asia. The reason the practice is so common is that ordinary people see family intermarriage overall as something that is very positive, something that helps build family bonds and helps put families on a more secure financial foothold. However, as is well documented, it is not without health risks for the children of those relationships, some of whom will be born out of wedlock. Instead of stigmatising those who are in cousin marriages or those inclined to be, a much more positive approach would be to facilitate advanced genetic test screening for prospective married couples, as is the case in all Arab countries in the Persian Gulf.
Yes, Arab countries in the Persian Gulf, not in the United Kingdom. But Labour isn't much better given they are so worried about Corbyn's new alliance stealing their seats at the next election. Robert Jenrick posted on X, I urged Labour to support the bill to ban first cousin marriage. Shamefully, they declined. And here's the proof of him doing exactly that.
Cousin marriage has absolutely no place in Britain. The medical evidence is overwhelming. It significantly increases the risk of birth defects. And the moral case is clear. We see hundreds of exploitative marriages which ruin lives. Frankly, it should have been stamped out a long time ago. Will the Justice Secretary commit to ending this medieval practice which is rearing its head once again in modern Britain?
He'll know that there has been a recent Law Commission report on marriage law more generally, and the government is going to consult on broader reform to marriage law, and we will certainly consider the issues that he's raised before setting out a public position.
Not good enough, I'm afraid. Not good enough. And the culture war we are facing in the UK is very, very real. Just ask Floyd Mayweather, the legendary American boxer who is pro-Israel. He had to be shepherded away by his security team when confronted quite violently while visiting London this week, just to shop, not to make a political point, just to shop, but look at the scenes he faced.
Money, man. Money, man, don't worry, you're good, man. They're trying to get me in there. What?
So look, this is the battle of our lives. And there is good reason to believe that the UK's two-party system might finally be about to be smashed. In all honesty, it is long overdue. But now, let me bring in my superstar panel. Absolutely delighted to have with me today Reverend Canon Father Phil Harris and the head of the brilliant Together Declaration, Alan Miller, who has hot-footed it from those incredible scenes at Westminster. And don't worry, we're going to be talking in depth about the incredible tractor convoy in Westminster later. But Alan, really connected to this, of course, is the surge of Nigel Farage. You spoke to him at the rally this morning. What do you make of the fact that he is now Bookies' favourite to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
Well, I think it's completely understandable, to be honest, that Nigel Farage is Bookie's favourite. If you think about what's happened in the last few months, we've got a government that said that they would not do all sorts of things, and then they've gone on to do the exact opposite. They've attacked pensioners, students and farmers, much loved farmers, drivers and citizens. And I think that the public is absolutely hungry and thirsty for honest discussion. They're fed up with some of the scenes that they've seen throughout the last year, in particular, across our streets. They don't accept the idea of two-tier policing, our judiciary being weaponized. They want to be able to speak freely and not run the risk of, being imprisoned for speculating on social media, or even for shouting at a protest or saying things that they think about, which are entirely reasonable to say in a democratic society, whilst other people say all sorts of things that challenge our very way of life and secular and democratic society. And it seems that if you challenge that at all, you're called all sorts of names like racist and other things. The public's fed up of it. They're fed up with the fact that you can't get a police officer to come if you have your house burgled, but criticise the idea that you can call a man. 6 police officers may come to your house or to your workplace. All of this stuff has gone far too far. And net zero being at the heart of the kind of zealotry that's impoverishing us and making Britain poorer. I think on a whole host of these things, the public's had enough. We've seen it in America, Dan. We've seen it with this new coalition of a kind of broad, popular set of people in a range of areas that has really transformed how we understand politics. A very exciting new dynamic. We need wealth creation in Britain. We need innovation. We need an inspiring view of the future, but we need to have control of things, of our public sector. The private sector needs to flourish. We need to be able to control our borders. The civil service can't keep usurping and stopping democratically elected representatives from doing what they want to do. All of this needs to end. The public has had enough of this. We've been saying this for a while together, getting the public's voices heard. But I think that's why we're going to see increasingly more people go with much of what Reform's saying and supporting Nigel, it looks like.
It really does look like that. It really does look like that. Father Phil, what do you make of the surging Reform UK?
Well, firstly, it's not surprising, is it?
No.
It really is not surprising. We are in a fractured society. And I put a tweet out, an X out a few days ago, that actually said that this is probably the last, or this will be the last Labour government, and we've probably seen the last Conservative government. Because
in history, ever? You think they're done?
I think they're done. I can't see. There's a tipping point, isn't there? And it's like the Titanic. When that final chamber fills with water, the boat is going down and there's no way of bringing it back. And I think that we've reached that tipping point, that there's no substance in Labour is no longer Labour and for the working classes, and the Conservative Party is no longer Conservative. And because, you know, the foundations of what those parties were set up for has eroded away, you know, they're no longer those valid parties that they were before. And so what it's created is a vacuum. And whether you agreed with Brexit or whether you didn't agree with Brexit, when you have the liberal Westminster elite frustrating the will of the people, you know at some point in the near future or the not too distant future that there is going to be a train smash. And we are on the cusp of that train smash right now. And, you know, I was at Parliament Square a few weeks ago and spoke at Parliament Square, you know, for the Unite Britain. And you could see really where people were at. I went and spent time, as I typically do, in the crowds and just listening to people. And that frustration, because as I say, the Conservatives are no longer Conservatives. The Labour Party are no longer Labour Party. And our democracy only works when there is a good opposition. And we've had a uniparty. And so we have.
And we've been lied to by both of them for decades. And the thing is, Alan Miller, it's actually a really good point for Father Phil to raise the issue of Brexit and democracy, right? Because we know that the establishment are prepared to overturn democracy. They wanted to subvert the biggest democratic vote in British history. Look at what's going on in Romania, for example. The establishment in that country doesn't like the result of the presidential election, so they say it's null and void. And I really feel like I'm scared of the lengths the establishment are going to go to here to stop the Uni Party being overturned.
Well, you know, we should, it's definitely a big concern. It should be noted that one of the reasons the Conservatives are so punished is because they were given a very strict instruction, and that was to implement Brexit. Now, formally speaking, we did do that. We got the Brexit vote passed, but all of the measures kept not being implemented in the way they could. We've kind of squandered much of that spirit and the sense of what Brexit, the instruction was. There's still not a leaving of the ECHR, and using constant bureaucratic reasons for not being able to implement things. The public are furious. They gave an instruction. Meanwhile, we see Keir trying to rekindle and attribute more kind of European and globalist institutions. He is Davos man. He says he's more comfortable in Davos than in the cut and thrust of Westminster.
He said it.
He said it. He said it. Davos over Westminster. That pesky business of the democratic cut and thrust, the debate and discussion, right?
Yeah,
being accountable. And this is a real concern. And I think the thing is that whilst that impulse is always there to go to the great and the good, the few institutions, the globalist organizations, I think now we've got a situation, and we're seeing it with the farmers, but equally, Dan, and we'll talk about it with some of these other independent parties, and I may not like their politics, but the fracturing of the old parties, the collapse and the disintegration of Labour, and what's happened to the Tories is going to mean a whole new set of things come out and come through. And it isn't just going to be the things that perhaps you or I might like. There'll be other things, but we need to be able to thrash these issues out openly, not being censored and shut down. And we need to be able to win over, I think we've got the majority of the public as it happens, right? But we need to be able to do that. And certainly we need to make sure that the idea that we're going to become more aligned to something we should have left and more kind of tied down with those things is not allowed to happen. That's really essential.
Okay, well, let's talk then, Father Phil, about some of the things that we might not like in this new system. And I'd say probably one of the things that we agree on, obviously we believe in democracy, but it's pretty terrifying seeing sectarian politics coming to the UK with what is going to be the establishment of this pro-Hamas grouping in Parliament, 5 MPs they have, and they are potentially going to take more seats away from Labour at the next election. So one of their MPs, Iqbal Mohammed, yesterday argues against first cousin marriage becoming illegal in the UK, and specifically argues in the British Parliament in Westminster that we need to be looking to Arab states in the Persian Gulf when we're making laws about issues like first cousin marriage. Now, look, absolutely, I believe in his right to free speech, and he is democratically elected, but it's terrifying, is it not?
Well, those words that you just spoke, and I will paraphrase them. When we look to the Arab states, that sets the agenda, does it not, Dan?
Of course.
That's the bit that is underlying, and we are at a very dangerous tipping point. And I think we talked about reform a few moments ago, and Nigel went on kind of a broadcast and said, by 2050, this will be the Muslim population in the UK. I don't know whether that was a wise comment by Nigel. The reality is that...
So you don't think Nigel's tough enough on Islam?
Correct, without any shadow of doubt. And I think that, you know, one of the bits for me personally is we have not seen the threat of radical Islam. And let me just be very clear, I have no problem with some wonderful people who are friends of mine who are Muslim. I have a problem with radical Islam, and I have a problem with the idea of Sharia law being implemented in some shape or form in this country. And I have a problem with the term Islamophobia, but the whole point of the MP highlighting this, what he's saying is actually Sharia law says this, and therefore we should not outlaw it.
Yeah, Alan Miller, how do we deal with that?
Well, I think the thing is that this is partly to do with the collapse of our own belief in our own values. The Enlightenment saw universal principles, free speech, but the secular separation between the state and religion, the idea of individual conscience, that was what the whole Reformation was about. You know, if we think about the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, all things spread from there. The ability for us to make decisions in private, the private and the public sphere. And the idea that we have anything like blasphemy laws, or that we somehow should adopt or allow things like religious laws to dictate what happens in our towns and cities, is actually absolutely anathema. And it's representative of a decadent political class that is not able to champion and celebrate what's so important, what our forefathers fought and died for, what people like William Tyndale actually was burnt at the cross for, which people put their lives on the stake for. And the fact is that we've seen a lot of this since the days of Salman Rushdie saying, I'm offended, and people have kowtowed to it. But now we've got a moment where it's not, you know, we saw it in the elections. We saw a Green MP then calling out Allahu Akbar, right? What has that got to do with Green politics in particular? And we've seen a situation, but I'm quite pleased in some ways, Dan. I think it's really good that they're actually saying who they are, that Jeremy Corbyn and so-called independents are saying, this is where we stand. So we can have an honest conversation, right? We
Yes,
can have an honest conversation.
Well, that is much better, is it not, Alan, than the Labour position, which is just appeasement, just opening the door a little bit to the idea of a blasphemy law, for example, not being prepared to talk about what's actually going on in our mosque. So you actually say it's better. Daylight is the best disinfectant. At least we know the extremist views of these sectarian political parties, and then we can fight it democratically.
And frankly, I want to be out there discussing and debating it. We were up in Rotherham and Rochdale, right? And we went up there during the elections and we were talking to people. And it's not a done deal by any means, right? There are millions of Muslims in this country, and many of them do not subscribe to the idea that you should have a Sharia law imposed on society. It's not just that there are violent radical Islamists. Islamism, even when it's not violent, attempts to suffocate secular democratic society and impose its own views. without violence, right? It will use the democratic method to do it in different places. However, people that are following our customs and our laws and our traditions and in our society who are Muslim do not want to do that. So it's important to make a distinction, but it's also essential to say that there are people that will use what we have to try and limit and suffocate things, and they'll attack all sorts of things like the idea of being able to be gay, or the role of women in society, or the role of free speech, or a range of other things. And I think when, it's not just, these independents, but you see it also, George Galloway and others have said some of these things in different contexts about Gaza, and it's fine. People can have a view about Gaza, but it's also about Britain. And what ends up happening is we have a discussion. Do we want to have a Sunni-inspired jihadi approach, like the Muslim Brotherhood have had, or like we've had what we've seen in other nation states that have been backed, and we've got like Qatar and others, or that's just taken over from Bashar Assad. Okay, Bashar Assad, terrible dictator and tyrant, absolutely, right? But now we've got a situation where Sunni jihadis that were tied to ISIS and Al-Qaeda before have come in. We've got a whole kind of serious situation that's going on there. We've seen what that's meant in a range of other areas, and they're the same factions that are fighting in other places. Now, if you look at what's happened and you look at some of the inspiration, I find it difficult that someone like Jeremy Corbyn on the one hand says that he believes in democracy and freedom, and yet if you believe in democracy or freedom in Gaza, or you're a nationalist, or you really want national independence for Palestinians, you were killed or imprisoned by Hamas. I find it difficult, and I want to discuss these things openly, right? It's all, people use these things, you're being racist, or don't you care about children dying? Well, absolutely we do, right? The thing is, people want peace. I agree, we want peace. Give the hostages back might be a first start for having peace, right? And then you could have a big conversation about history.
But also the conversation has to extend to what is going on in mosques in the United Kingdom. And that's the conversation that Labour will not have, because they're too scared. And yeah, you're right. When it comes to Gaza and Israel, Labour doesn't even really want to have that conversation, Alan, because they're just so scared they try and take an almost neutral position, which is impossible in a conflict like this. But sorry, Alan.
I just will say as well about that we've seen all of this since 9/11 onwards, and we've seen a situation, but we have got to have the confidence in our beliefs and our values, and we've got to uphold them. No more two-tier policing, no more being embarrassed to implement measures because someone might say you're being racist or offensive. Correct. It's one rule. It should be policing without fear or favour, universal, same ascribed situation for our laws, hold it with authority. In our schools, we can't allow the imposition of ideology onto the things. We have to assert we're a secular society with democratic principles, and we respect private faith of people. It was actually Church of England country. It was meant to be. I don't know what happened to all of that, right? And so you've got a situation where we need to uphold those values, because the decadent elite, the technocrats, they don't believe in it anymore. And worse than that, they're embarrassed about it. And I think that we need to resuscitate that debate and discussion about what's so important, that we are the custodians of those things, that it doesn't happen. And a lot of these nations that we're seeing in the countries we're being told to be more like by some of these people, if we have these kind of conversations, you get a knock on the door, you get imprisoned.
Yes, absolutely. And then we have the issue with the mainstream media, which I raised in my digest. And I wanted to show you this little clip from a guy called Bruce's Randomness, who was responding to James O'Brien automatically saying that the folk like me who have an issue with Sadiq Khan becoming Sir Sadiq Khan, given he has literally destroyed the greatest city in the world, well, we are racist. Watch this.
Right-wing media going so bonkers.
The right-wing media. This coming from the formerly known London Broadcasting Company, now known as the left-wing broadcasting crap organisation that he works for, but let's let him continue.
I understand why some corners of it are so cross about a three-time elected London mayor being nominated for a knighthood. It's because he's brown.
Oh, it's because he's brown. Right, okay, James, because you're the only person who's actually said that. It has nothing to do with the colour of his skin. I think it has everything to do with the fact that knife crime is up in...
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Totally, that is what it's about, Father Phil. But how on earth can we ever have debates about what's really going on, about the destruction of our society, if we have fools like that immediately running to say, oh, it's because he's brown, when they never say, oh, the reason that someone's attacking Kemi Badenoch is because she's black?
Yeah.
So Alan is correct about light being the disinfectant and bring things into the light. The problem that we've got is we have people trying not to bring things into the light, and when you have conversations that are meaningful, they shut them down with typical tropes of bigotry, racism, etc. But you have a mainstream media who is determined not to bring them into the light and not to have the conversations that Alan is actually referring to. And so it's this kind of, it's the strangling and suppression that we were speaking a few moments about. But there is this whole agenda that is gradually, breaking apart. You can see the seams coming apart right now. But we've got, and the majority of the people, Alan's right. I don't think that it's the majority of people. I know it's the majority of people, and certainly in my world from the Christian Church. And Alan raised a point about the Church of England. This is still a Christian country. The monarch is the supreme governor of the Church of England. The problem is we've abdicated for all those things that are right. And I am fed up of having to apologize for the state of the church because we haven't stood for the people. We haven't stood alongside the people and with the people and held people to account. And I think that, there's a verse in Isaiah that says, woe to them that call evil good and good evil, and put darkness for light and light for darkness, and put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And what we have is people doing that in mainstream media. We have politicians doing that. We have it everywhere. We are up is down, down is up, sky is green, grass is blue. And people are, certain people are falling for it. Meanwhile, the common sense people who have been centrist, and they might even be centrist slightly left or centrist slightly right, are now disillusioned because we are seeing what's happening before us. But we've got to somehow bring it into the light. And it's where, togetherness, just kind of, quoting Alan's movement of bringing people together so that we can stand together and let the political elites know. And it's very interesting. I know we're going to, we've touched on farming.
Yes, and we'll come to that shortly.
And there's a whole agenda there, but you have politicians now who are caught out because they have constituents who are going to be affected by this nonsense. But we have to get all this conversation into the light. We need to be brave around it. We need to talk about it. And we need to talk honestly about it.
We do, and thank goodness you two are doing that. Now, breaking right now, Wes Streeting has banned puberty blockers for all under 18s in the UK. That's the Health Secretary, leading the brilliant, brave, Father Ted created Graham Linehan, the man who lost everything to claim that the gender critical movement has won. But I would say it's one step forward, two giant steps backwards. Because on the same day, the UK's independent press regulator, they're not quite as bad as the off-communists, but they're up there, Ipso, has forced The Spectator, the oldest periodical in the world, to apologise after its brilliant writer Gareth Roberts, you might remember Gareth was outrageously axed from the Doctor Who writing team for expressing his views on the trans debate as a gay man, described Juno Dawson as a man who claimed to be a woman. We'll debate this in just one moment with Father Phil and Alan Miller, but I think it's worth me setting out what Michael Gove, the new editor of The Spectator, had to say about this. So Gove writes, on the 21st of May this year, we published an article by the brilliant writer Gareth Roberts, headlined The Sad Truth About St. Nicholas Sturgeon. Gareth was reporting on the former Scottish First Minister's appearance at a literary festival in Sussex. Ms. Sturgeon was discussing the controversies which had attended her time in office, including her views on independence and gender recognition laws. Gareth noted that she was interviewed by writer Juno Dawson, a man who claims to be a woman, and so the conversation naturally turned to gender. Juno Dawson subsequently complained about those words to Ipso. It was claimed the words were inaccurate, a breach of Section 1 of the Editor's Code, which governs inaccuracy, a breach of Section 3, which covers harassment, and a breach of Section 12.1, which holds that the press must avoid prejudicial or pejorative references to an individual's race, colour, religion, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, or to any physical or mental illness or disability. Ipso found there was no breach of Section 1 or 3. Gareth's words were not inaccurate and were not harassment, but they concluded that they were a breach of 12.1. In its judgment, the article had included a reference in the complainant's gender identity that the committee considered to be both pejorative and prejudicial. The committee had expressed its concerns that this reference was personally belittling and demeaning towards the complainant. Given the nature of the breach, the appropriate remedial action was the publication of an upheld adjudication. Now, Gove says, we publish what Ipso requires of us, but I am in no doubt that this is an outrageous decision offensive to the principle of free speech and chilling in its effect on free expression. And look, this is chilling in so many ways. Alan Miller of the Together Declaration, let me come first to you. Surely this was just the moment for Michael Gove and the Spectator to say, we are out. We are out. Because they have stated a biological fact and have had to publish a censure in their own magazine. Now, Ipso is not a government regulator. There's nothing forcing the Spectator to stay a part of this sham.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of Je suis Charlie for Charlie Hebdo, who were brutally attacked and everyone was standing up saying, oh, we are Charlie as well. We'll stand for free speech and free expression. And you think, it's cowardice, really, if we cannot stand up to uphold our own free speech and our ability, and nowhere more than in our journalistic fraternity. We've seen so many measures clamping down, suffocating free speech and censorship. And this speaks to your point about the mainstream media as well, Dan. Now, I'm a great respecter of the Spectator, but I do think that the more that we allow this ability to be stifled and suffocated and censored, that is going to just deaden society further. And we all have a duty, we have a responsibility to things way beyond just ourselves, to our society, to our way of life, to our children, to everyone, to uphold the freedoms that we are the custodians of. And we've got to speak freely, and we've got to be able to call a thing what it is. People can decide whatever they want about how they want to live their lives. I'm quite libertarian about all of that, but it's very important that we are able to state things. And there's nothing that's more basic than what is a man and what is a woman. And the fact that people have been cancelled, they've been terrorized, they've had all of their job prospects and their work and their whole situation diminished. And the fact that we've got all sorts of editorial controllers, and now that this measure has been done, is absolutely unacceptable, right? And all around us, we see this madness of men fighting women in a boxing ring, the BBC championing men football player. I mean, what is going on, right? And there's an element of this with the Emperor's New Clothes, right? The more that we get the public involved, and the more that the public say, "Are you joking? Are you kidding? Where did you make this up?" Then that is the ability. That is how we get this turned. And what's happened, though, is
because
that
just a few years ago, Alan, you would probably be called transphobic if you were against the idea of puberty blockers for 14-year-olds or 16-year-olds. Well, it's illegal now.
It's brilliant news. That bit's brilliant news. And the fact is that the abuse that's been heaped onto our children, right? This is the thing that's so disingenuous and so dishonest. And we have a moral and ethical duty to our children to protect and defend them. If people want to make decisions as adults when they've got their faculties and they decide to do things, you know, one might disagree, whatever. But the idea that children were having this, and also that they were having it, they were being engaged and manipulated and told to do things and by adults, and then not have their parents involved as well. I mean, all these things are absolutely unacceptable.
Yep, totally. And by the way, well done also, because I've only mentioned the gay men fighting for this so far, but well done to Sharon Davies and J.K. Rowling, who also lost so much to argue this point.
Yes.
But Father Phil, just before I come to you, I want to read out just a little bit of the Daily Telegraph editorial today that has also come out against this decision. The newspaper writes, by deciding to rule in favour of Dawson on this matter, Ipso risks a chilling effect on the ability of gender-critical voices to express their views and make the strongest arguments available to them, including the argument that a legal change of gender does not alter biological reality. It would have been far better if the regulator had chosen to remain above the fray rather than weighing in. Now, again, I completely agree with the Daily Telegraph's point there, Father Phil, but don't they have to get out? Because otherwise they are accepting that this type of censorship is appropriate. And at GB News, for example, I think they made a real mistake by always saying, oh, no, we love the off-communists. We think they're great and we want to be regulated. No, we don't, because regulation means free speech being taken away. And if these bodies are going to remain part of Ipso, I don't think they can claim to care about free speech.
I think you're absolutely right. And there's another point that maybe we haven't hit on. So this argument was over Gareth reporting on the fall of Nicola Sturgeon around her gender recognition laws. And so how do you, when this reporting, which was seemingly problematic by Juno Dawson, when Juno reported that, there is an element of bias here because she is a man who claims to be a woman. How can Gareth report on this without falling foul of 12.1? You cannot. It's just impossible to report on it because he's highlighting that there is maybe bias in the reporting. And so there's no way that he can report without falling foul of 12.1. So Ipso doesn't work. And obviously Ipso was set up as in opposition to a state-regulated, free speech. And God help us if that had been the case. But, people now have to just go, hang on. We can't have these ridiculous controls, and they are ridiculous controls. And, Michael Gove's comments just don't wash, do they? There's no way that we can have free speech if we are bowing down to these organisations, Ipso included.
No, indeed. And the thing is, you look at the reporting, for example, of that shocking case of Adam Graham. Do you remember this? This was the rapist in Scotland who ended up in a women's prison. And here you have the Guardian newspaper, and I've checked, I can't believe they haven't changed it. Throughout this article, they refer to Adam Graham as a she. Now, a couple of things on that, Father Phil. A she cannot commit a rape. It's impossible for a woman to commit a rape based on the legal definition of a rape. Secondly, there is a lot of evidence when it comes to Adam Graham that the cynical transition to become Isla Bryson was simply to end up in a female prison, was absolutely based on sexual orientation and the desire to commit more heinous crimes. And I think the media that gives into this ideology to appease the woke mob is despicable. Because I'm sorry, when it comes to calling a male rapist she, you have lost the plot. And it's not just The Guardian, by the way. They all do this now.
Woe to those that call evil good and good evil and put darkness for light and light for darkness. And XX and XY are biological facts. And I just don't know in what universe that people think that this, in what Be Nice universe, that this can be excused. I just can't get my head around it. I can't see it, other than, you know, it's calling good evil and evil good, and bitter sweet and sweet bitter. I just can't, you know, it's so obvious, you know, as day and night, and yet we are denying these facts. And there's no question in my thinking that there was an agenda here. And yeah, words. Sometimes I just read my Twitter feed and I'm just speechless.
I know. But the thing is, Alan Miller, doesn't all of this regulation just actually end up completely undermining the future of the mainstream media again? Because the great thing about Elon Musk taking control of X is that we were allowed to start telling the truth about biological reality. I mean, you remember Graham Linehan was booted off its previous incarnation of Twitter simply for refusing to call a man a woman and a woman a man. He literally lost his account. But the newspapers are playing by the old rules. And what we're going to do in the online space is say, to hell with that. We're going to tell the truth.
Absolutely. I think the thing is that the days are numbered for Ipso and Ofcom. I mean, I think that the public can see, with Ofcom in particular, that, you know, it's not the same as goose for gander, in the same way that the so-called BBC misinformation, you know, they like, when they do BBC Verify, they like to use a Labour activist to give numbers of the farmers that would say it's like 500 families that are going to be affected. Then it turns out, oh, well, actually, that's a Labour activist that they're using, but they use that as a verified piece of information. Then they call what other people are saying disinformation and misinformation. It's become so transparent. It's so tedious. It's not even dangerous anymore. It was dangerous. It is what it is it's annoying, but the truth will out. And Elon Musk has done a remarkable thing on that with X now, with Twitter. But I think across the board, we've seen in the States with Joe Rogan, and we've seen what's happened with the presidential election and Tucker Carlson and a range of others, the smaller broadcasters that are doing that. And obviously what you're doing, Dan, and people in the UK are doing, from trigonometry to a whole range of other people. This is important, exciting stuff. Now, I want a note of caution. I think it is important that we have well-funded, long-term investigative journalism that is objective, but we see so little of that. The old days of Panorama and World in Action of 30 years ago is long gone. And so we have the worst of all worlds, really. We have a celebrity-obsessed, kind of myopic mainstream media that doesn't ever want to step outside its bubble. I think people saw that during lockdowns and constantly asking for more, longer, harder. Now we're seeing that again with a range of other issues, and people are fed up of it. And you can't keep calling the whole of the British public neo-Nazis or far right or phobes of some kind when all they want to do is live a decent life, earn some more money, have a safe environment, and have some things that used to be just called common sense up until about 5 minutes ago. But you just attack them with contempt and disdain. It's not tenable. And, you know, like my son's just finishing university, a lot of his friends, you can see this discussion's turned. The idea that all the younger people are against, you know, they're all of a particular view, or they're all what they call what is now the left or the woke thing. It's just not true, right? There's a lot of young people that are thinking they're not happy with this idea that you must do this and you must do that. And a lot of the stuff that's been happening in our arena, the new spaces of media, have helped curate those conversations and discussions, help them thinking against some of that stuff. And that old bastion of legacy media is seen as being a bit of a propaganda machine. And I think the gig's up.
Very good point. Very good point. Now, look, stand by both, because Alan has been at the incredible tractor convoy in Westminster today. But in just one moment, I'm going to show you how those despicable creatures at Sly News decided to treat the whole thing as a joke and laugh in the face of farmers. Of course, it was led by Kay Burley. So much more from Alan Miller and Father Phil in just 1 minute. But first, with the holidays creeping up faster than your aunt's fruitcake recipe, I've got something way better to share with you. The discount on this is going to be something you want to hear. So if you want to look sharp for all those festive gatherings, maybe finally win the Best Groomed at the Family Dinner Award, check out the latest masterpiece from Manscaped, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. Trust me, this is like Rudolph for your face, guiding you to a smooth, irritation-free shave. So let's dive into the goods. Here it is. Beautiful, right? The Chairman Pro. Armed with not one, but two interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. These are your grooming superheroes. The 4-blade foil for when you want that baby's bottom smooth, and the skin-safe stubble trimmer for when you want to keep some stubble but clean it up a bit. Both keep you looking sharp while minimising razor burn and irritation. Because nobody wants to show up to the holiday party looking like they lost a fight with a Christmas tree, right? But wait, there's more. The Chairman Pro has Flex Adjust technology, which is basically like the holiday miracle of shaving. Like Santa's elves made it just for you. The blades and pivoting head adjust to every curve of your face. I can tell you, I use it myself. It's very gentle on the neck area, as if they have the gift of foresight. So go ahead, kiss that awkward jawline patch goodbye. No more pretending it doesn't exist while you hope nobody notices under the mistletoe. And if you want even more precision, on the right side of the bracket, there's a precision lock. So when you lock it, the blade head sits firm so you can achieve a more precise shave. And here's something that's going to make your grooming routine even easier. The Chairman Pro is waterproof, so you can use it right in the shower. And the waterproof feature doesn't just make shaving easier, it also simplifies cleanup. Just a quick rinse under the sink and you're all set. The Chairman Pro isn't just for daily shaves either. It's powerful enough to tackle up to 5-day growth, making it perfect whether you're shaving every day or just tidying up after a few days. And with up to 75 minutes of runtime on a single charge, you'll have plenty of juice to go from Santa's beard to smooth as a snow angel. It even has a travel lock to help make sure it doesn't accidentally turn on in your bag, and an LED spotlight to help you see every detail, ensuring nothing gets missed. So get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. It has everything you need to keep your face looking and feeling its best all in one box. So head on over to www.manscaped.com. Join me and the 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. If you use the code Outspoken at checkout, you get free shipping and a whopping 20% off your entire order. Great for Christmas. So that's www.manscaped.com. It's a brilliant gift, by the way, if you're thinking of something for your hubby or your boyfriend. I know they can be hard to buy for. Use the coupon code Outspoken. But now, back to the show. And there were incredible, awe-inspiring scenes at Westminster today as the farmers' tractor convoy went all around the world. This is the start of a major resistance as the socialist British government goes to war with the people who supply our food. And if you look at some of the images, honestly, it's just brilliant. Watch this.
It really is a serious issue, Kay, that we're about to see being played out on Whitehall.
Well, here I am in Westminster, and the farmers have come out in force. From the whole length of Whitehall, we can see tractor after tractor, bonnet to boot, if that's the way you call it. But I can assure you, the atmosphere is right. It's calm, it's peaceful, and rightfully they're protesting honestly. And I'm here to back them, as is all Fairfield UK supporters.
Some brilliant on-the-ground reporting there from Howard Cox. And honestly, I've been watching the interviews all day. There is so much emotion, so much power behind this. This is something the farmers have thought long and hard about. The BBC, the British Bashing Corporation, didn't even bother to show up. No major coverage at all. And those despicable people at Sly News decided to treat the thing. Because remember, they live in this little metropolitan bubble. Farmers are like aliens to them. They just don't understand what this is going to do to farmers. So the whole thing for Kay Burley and her horrible brood of witches was just to laugh.
It really is a serious issue, Kay, that we're about to see being played out on Whitehall.
I'm just looking at some pictures that our producer Sam has just sent in. He's just nipped down to see what he can see, and it's the image of tractors literally on London streets, with a juxtaposition of vans and vehicles and buses. It's wild.
Ironically, on London streets, the tractors will not be the slowest traffic either. They'll be able to keep up with the prevailing conditions, won't they? But there's a New Holland on the left-hand side, a John Deere on the right. We've seen some fence, some cases, I think possibly even a McCormick, which you don't often see. So I'm having a very lovely day.
Fantastic. They're going to close Whitehall. I'm not sure that they've actually done it yet, but they are planning to. How will the Prime Minister get to PMQs?
There's lots of other ways you can get to PMQs. He will not be bothered by that. There's always a little back alley, back channel.
Up through the Treasury, basically,
there
isn't
you
it?
go.
Yeah.
So he'll be fine.
Or through the Foreign Office.
Yeah, there's plenty of options for him. They always have plans for this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Alan Miller, you were there today. What derisory coverage from Sly News. Their biggest concern, how's Starmer going to get to PMQs? And isn't this just a novelty? But you didn't see the British Bashing Corporation there at all, Alan.
I did not see the BBC there at all. And I think the thing is, the point is that so many people, I think this is the same as what's happened to the government. They kind of thought, it's a few people who don't vote for us. It's a few aristos. They thought that everyone in the city would go, we don't like those farmers. They completely have misunderstood the situation. Contemptuous because they promised that they would never do anything like this pre-election. Then after the election, they impose these measures that are so damaging. Then they try and get the Treasury to say 500 farmers will be affected. And we know the number's more like 70 to 75,000. Even DEFRA do not agree with the Treasury. But the serious thing is that the farmers have shown their mettle again. They've shown their grit. They've shown their cool, calm resolve. They're very respectful. Make sure you clean up after ourselves, but at the same time, robust determination that this is not going to end.
For now, but Alan, can I just ask, because I have seen some farmers today now starting to talk about much more serious action. I've seen some of the farmers today talking about the blockading of key routes, the blockading of ports. I mean, genuine lots of civil disobedience. Now, that goes against the approach that Nigel Farage has been advocating for. He doesn't want to go, there he is at the protest, but he doesn't want to go down French-style destruction. Where do you and the Together Declaration stand on that?
I think the thing is that farmers have been very clear. They're saying, listen to us. If you don't, we're going to continue. Now, I think it just to be noted that, we're working with farmers behind the scenes and in front of it. It's also small and medium-sized businesses that are being really damaged and harmed by these new measures, as of course with the NI and care homes, and everyone's being impacted. But what they're saying is they're going to do a number of things. They're not giving all their cards away and they're holding some of it back. But don't expect to see things like Just Stop Oil. Don't expect to see that type of thing. They're not interested in making commuters suffer or things like that. But we do know that food distribution centres are on the radar, right? Yeah. We also know, and it was said today at the speeches, the farmers could shut this country down pronto, very fast. No one could stop them. They don't want to have to do all of this. However, if this government is not going to be big about this and say, look, all right, if we really wanted to genuinely deal with a few people that are using this as a way of a tax avoidance, very wealthy, we've miscalculated this. We can go back to the drawing board. Let's assess it. If you're a real family farm, you've been there for generations, and you're all right, we're going to deal with it. We've listened. That would be the big thing to do. Unfortunately, they may see it as a sign of weakness and that somehow they failed. So they're going to dig their heels in. If they do that, I'm just going to say that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer and Steve Reid, you should listen to the words of the farmers. They are not going to stop. In the same way that the weather does not stop them, these measures and impositions, these are multi-generational families. They're not about to give up their whole way of life. And citizens are not about to let the backbone of our society, of our culture, our food security and our independence just be jettisoned and made extinct. This is really serious. Yes. And this is why we're so involved with it. It's why we've encouraged everyone to do a mass campaign to not just to write to their MPs, but to go and visit them at surgeries and call them. But beyond that, we've got people locally, regionally, nationally campaigning on the street, working with farmers. There's initiatives with counties and others, which we can talk to you more about. Some more people will come and talk to you, Dan. But there's a whole range of things that are in place And I really think people would be silly if they did not take this very seriously. This is going to continue, and the government is not going to win it.
I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. We saw you there, Alan, speaking to Nigel Farage. He also spoke to GB News today. Watch this.
And remember this, Labour have got approximately 100 members of Parliament who are now representing rural or at least semi-rural constituencies. These kind of protests need to be, by the way, peaceful, obviously, but need to be in every market town in England. And we need to get the great British public behind small businesses, behind our farmers. And you know what? Fear of losing the next election. And let's face it, Starmer's not off to a great start, is he really? I mean,
well, there's the understatement of the year, maybe.
So where do you stand on this one, Father Phil? Do you think the farmers need to take stronger action?
I've been watching this intently. This whole stance of the government, just like the winter fuel allowance, is just morally wrong and bankrupt. I've had so many spats on Twitter with people over this. I noticed now comments from Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, and the realisation of Labour
farmers and tractors that come down to Whitehall.
Those seats are clearly a concern, as Nigel Farage has highlighted. But I was listening to Liz Webster from Save British Farming earlier today, and she was being interviewed by Kay Burley, and she introduced the concept of holding back supplies. And Kay was quite dismissive by saying, well, that's not going to get the public's backing. The reality is, Alan is right. The farmers could actually shut down this nation very, very, very quickly. And again, it's the Labour Liberal elites who are clueless, utterly clueless as to what this is going to cost.
What did you think, Father Phil, of the Kay Burley clip of her sort of cackling and treating the whole thing as if it's just almost like a sideshow?
What utter disrespect, what utter cluelessness, for want of a better word. There is no concept of these people of the impact that this is going to have, not just on people's lives who make very little money in relative terms, and they have assets that are assets to produce food that they're no longer going to maintain. There is just no concept of what this costs people in rural places. And of course, you know, we've just go through the harvest festivals in churches, and in times past, and this is quite significant for me, those altars will have been full. Those chancels will be filled with produce, with fresh produce at the harvest festivals. And of course, since COVID, it's tinned food. And I think that we have moved, people in the cities have moved away from understanding what farmers do. And Kate has just been utterly disrespectful. I mean, the phrase she used there, it's wild. I tell you what's wild, Kay. You are just being disrespectful and clueless, and you are going to bring, with your attitude, this nation to its knees. Totally. Shame on you.
Everything that is wrong with the MSM. Very, very good point, Father Phil. Just finally, Alan Miller, what's the next biggie with the farmers? Do you have something planned yet, or is it going to come after Christmas?
So there is something on the 16th at the Palladium, the London Palladium. Andrew Lloyd Webber's handed that over to have some of the organisers from the 19th.
Oh, incredible. What a man. I love that.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's going to bring together farmers and small and medium-sized businesses. So that's it. And then in the new year, there's some more stuff. Watch togetherdeclaration.org. We're working with a lot of farmers. We're encouraging everyone to come out. And behind the scenes, we're all working on things. And I just think that the more that the farmers can hear that all your viewers and everyone's behind them and we're all standing together, the better. And let our MPs know. And let our MPs know and keep that going, because our food security and our way of life and the backbone of Britain and our culture needs to be upheld and defended.
Indeed, and this is why the Together Declaration is so important. I absolutely back everything you're doing, Alan. Together.org. Really recommend that people support Together. It's not just about farming. It's about free speech. It's about bodily autonomy, all of the key areas that we need to keep fighting for. So thank you for all you do, Alan Miller. And thank you so much to Reverend Canon Father Phil Harris. Absolutely brilliant to have you back on Outspoken today. But coming up in the Uncancelled Aftershow, royal YouTube sensation Paula M joins the show for the first time to reveal some big news on a big lie that Meghan Markle just told in her new Netflix series Polo. Really looking forward to that conversation. You know, it's very important to me that we have a safe space not patrolled by big tech where censorship and control runs deep. So that's why I launched www.outspoken.live. It's our membership section on Substack, half an hour of extra exclusive content every day. All you need to do is enter your email address into that little line, is that what you call it, little form, and you can sign up completely for free. Although if you do want to support the Outspoken venture from just £5 plus VAT if you're in the UK a month, I would obviously be very, very grateful because it allows me to continue making Outspoken and this show. And I hope you see from all of the issues that we've discussed today and through all of the dishonesty of the mainstream media that this is an important cause. So thank you so much for all of your support. We're back live tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Do hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and Rumble. Most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you, but I hope to see you for the after show on Substack in just one moment.